Hello, everybody. This is SOS, and I am here with my co-host,
Dirty Birdie, the worst spy ever.
the worst spy ever. And why is that, Bertie?
Because I'm a spy. Why would I go on YouTube and blab?
There you go. All right. We are continuing on with our funeral home uh, series. So we released last week the Downard Funeral Home disaster.
Oh
That was
boy.
Yeah, and by the way, I did find out that they moved the pre-trial conference to March 3rd. So, it was supposed to be in January, now it's moved to March 3rd. I really hope there's no more delays. We need to get this going to get some justice for the
Yeah,
families.
I don't know about that, man. They always keep pushing stuff like this further and further back.
I
So,
know, I know. But hopefully, fingers crossed, but today we're talking about a new one. And this is bonkers, okay? So, this is called the Return to Nature Funeral Home in Colorado. So,
did we talk about this one before?
no, no,
Slightly?
no, that was a different one. We I
How many of these are
oh
there?
oh my gosh, once I started researching this stuff, it's like more and more and more and more. This one is bonkers. The one I just finished last night so that we can record it maybe in a week or so, that one was crazy. And it has a famous person in kind of sort of involved, not really, but there's a tie-in there, and it's just craziness. Like these people are crazy, okay? So at first I'm going to talk about the licensing requirements, just like I did in Idaho, because I want people to understand Colorado is actually more stringent than Idaho on some of their licensing requirements, but this was really the catalyst to make the change, okay? So
Oh, that just makes me wonder how much more buffoonery was going on before
oh,
this is just like, yeah, no, we're done. Stop
oh,
messing around.
and I want to give a shout out, and I can do this, I think, because it's our podcast, to Sawtooth Brewery. Oh my God, their beer, Three Wolf Porter, is fabulous. So cheers to Sawtooth for making one of the best porters I've ever had.
Not a sponsor.
Mm-mm.
Gotta say, not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor. I just like their beer. Okay, here we go. So the licensing requirements now, and I'm not too sure what was before this problem and after this problem. So all I know is what they present now on the licensing board requirements, okay, for funeral homes in Colorado. So right now it's 4,000 hours of work experience, which uh, which is performed by a funeral director, mortuary science practitioner, embalmer, cremationist, or natural reductionist. So, okay. I don't know
What?
what natural reductionist is. I didn't find that. I don't understand what that is.
Um,
But
uh,
it could be we may find out later. Maybe I'll see. We'll see. And then so they have to do like a peer review report, which is a qualified peer reviewer. So that person has to have a provisional. They certify the provisional licensee has completed all of these qualifications. Okay, and the provisional licensee is if they're wanting to become a funeral director, they have to submit proof of having at least 25 funerals within the previous 3 years, kind of like Idaho. Idaho was the same, I believe. And they have to do 25 if they want to be a full mortuary science practitioner. They have to do 25 embalmings in the previous three within the previous 3 years. And if they're looking for a full license as an embalmer, they have to do at least 25 embalmings within the previous 3 years. There's all of these. That sounds very similar to the one that I just read you, but I think no fewer than 25. So I think the embalmer has to actually that they, they have to do a lot more. So then they have to pay their fees. There's just all kinds of stuff required to be a licensed funeral home director in the state of Colorado. And this is the case that really pushed these regs to change and get more strict. So, well, let's get into this. This happened October 9th, 2023. There were search warrants issued at the Return to Nature funeral home. They were in Penrose, Colorado. And there was an odor complaint, as usual with these types of situations. There's an odor complaint that leads to ring, ring, hello, 911. There's something wrong. Okay. And they found that there was a body of a woman that had been left to decompose for 2 years in a hearse parked outside the house that the funeral home rented. Okay,
What?
that started it, but it gets so much worse.
What? They just left somebody in a hearse
In a hearse,
outside for 2 years.
2
Who?
years, 2 years of the funeral home. So this was a rented building, or yeah, I guess it was a rented building that the Return to Nature funeral home, which was owned by John and Carrie Hallford. So they get into the door and they found 115 cremated remains of others inside. But apparently there wasn't a lot of being able to figure out whose body was who. So
Oh,
there was just
no.
boxes and boxes and boxes of remains. Some commingled remains from what I've read in some articles, not sure about that, but anyway, and here's the issue. So at the time of this discovery, Colorado had some of the weakest regulatory requirements for funeral homes. They didn't have any routine inspections, and they had very little qualification requirements. So this problem was the catalyst for all of these regs to change as of this month, this year. Okay. So they had to give everybody a grace period to get their paperwork in order.
Yeah, and I could see that happening, and it gets on the news, it goes everywhere, and they're like, "It's going federal," and all these slacker places are like, "We need to clean up our act or they're gonna find out," and they did.
Yeah. Um, so as I said, the owners of the funeral home were John and Carrie Hallford. And a year before the discovery of all these bodies, they had moved their funeral business from Penrose, Colorado to Colorado Springs. And they just apparently left all these remains and that body, and there's other issues that we'll get into there, and walked away. Okay. The and then
Wow.
yeah. So they decided, let's just move and let's open this new funeral home in Colorado Springs, which they then got evicted from because for something like 8 months to a year, they just stopped paying rent on the property. And they also didn't pay their taxes on the Penrose property that they owned. And they were sued um, for unpaid bills by a crematory service that quit doing business with them almost a year prior to the discovery of the bodies. So, but it's not for
Wow.
lack of money. It's not for lack of money, and I'll tell you why. Um, they're a mess. Okay. Return to Nature offered cremations and green burials, air quotes, green burials, without embalming fluids, which which is thus the name return to nature, because the bodies weren't embalmed, so they would decay faster, they decompose, and there wasn't chemicals in the body. And a lot of people thought that was really cool, but it also causes them to decompose faster if they're not in cold storage, if they're not being
Yeah.
frozen, right?
Ink.
Yeah. And they kept doing business as all of these problems kept stacking up. Okay. More than 120 families worried about that their relatives were among the remains, started contacting law enforcement when they heard the first news blib on the radio and on the news saying, oh my God, there's all of these remains. And it wasn't just cremated remains. There were among so when law enforcement was contacted by all these relatives, they started researching, and they go in. I don't know if this was a different building, but they started. Well, they had to have an FBI team come in because they found bodies stacked up top each other, decaying, and the bodies were swarming with insects, and they were too far decayed to make any kind of positive identification. Now, think about that. So, the FBI has to come in and they're going to try to do DNA analysis, but you have all of this tissue that's in a big
Ugh.
heap. So, it's going to be really hard to do that. So, I guess you could extract maybe teeth and get DNA out of
Yeah, you
the
could probably
root.
get teeth. Yeah,
Yeah,
at the most.
that would help, I would imagine, just, just off the top of my head. They so they didn't really release a lot of the information because of the ongoing investigation, but the Fremont sheriff, who then was, and I don't know if he's still Alan Cooper, his name, he said it was absolutely a horrific scene when they came in there, and they were, like I said, too far decayed for visual identification. And the building was so toxic that the first responders had to wear hazmat gear. And they could only, even in hazmat gear, which means you're respirated, you have Tyvek on, and you're completely suited up, they could only be inside for brief periods at a time because the air was so toxic. Think of that.
You're in a
Okay.
hazmat suit and you can only last like maybe what, less than 10 minutes in a building before you have to
Yeah.
run outside and not try to like
Vomit.
ruin your suit.
Yeah. They said that bodies were lying on the ground, stacked on shelves, left on gurneys, stacked on top of each other, or just piled into rooms. And they walked away from this.
What was their
Um,
plan? Was their plan to like just go to this new spot, get it set up, come back, pile everybody in a van, and then take them down there? Or what was the deal here? Just to leave them?
I think they just walked away from it and thought they could start over again.
Uh,
Who- Is there really a plan with people like this?
I I don't know. I don't know if I was like, you know what, I want out of this game. I'd be like calling all my mortuary buddies and be like, I'm out. I'm done. Can you
Yeah,
help me
well,
like
people like
do
this and
this?
people like what happened here in Pocatello, they're also, just wait until you hear what financial stuff, okay?
Yeah, it's always the financials.
Yeah, it's money. It's all about money. There's no indication that state regulators visited the site or contacted the owners until more than 10 months after the Penrose Funeral Home's registration expired. So they weren't, the state lawmakers, like I said, when I was an inspector out in California, I did annual inspections, and it was for air quality, but there were state inspectors in those buildings all the time because I did air quality, and then you had various different inspectors out there, and then they had Their stacks had to be tested there for the crematory and all this stuff, right? So there's always a level of regulatory oversight. And I know that in some people might think there's too much regulatory oversight. And I agree with a lot of that. But in something like this, I don't know that there's too much.
Yeah. If you
Like I said, I'd go in the door, ask for 3 years of records. If I was in there the last 12 months and all I needed was 12 months of records, and usually it was a fairly easy inspection. It was easy. I could look at 12 months because I knew the last time. I could go back to the last before my inspection. I'd pull up the last one and see where I left off. So it was very easy for me to walk in the door.
Yeah, if you've never smelled body being cremated, trust me, we need these people to
I
make sure
actually,
everything's clean because it stinks.
yeah. Yeah, and I have, because they would be cremating while I was in there, and the odorizer you put in a stack doesn't necessarily happen in a building. It's
That funeral home we did last time,
yeah. You said it was
bad,
really
so
bad. Yeah,
bad.
it's bad. So it doesn't appear that the state inspectors in Colorado were doing inspections on a regular basis, and um, their license expires in 10 months. More than 10 months goes by before they even contacted John and Carrie Halford. Like, what did they think? They haven't relinquished their licenses. So obviously, if they haven't relinquished their licenses, they're
They're
obviously still doing this
doing it. Yep.
without the license. Okay. So state lawmakers in Colorado, this was last year, gave regulators the authority to inspect funeral homes without the owner's consent. And that's how we did our inspections. All of our inspections that I did for all of air quality, they were not, you didn't call them up and make an appointment. You showed up.
Hmm?
You showed up at every industry I worked in that I inspected. I just showed up at the door and said, "Hello, I'm here and I'm here to do your inspection." No one was ever given advance notice. So finally, Colorado gets with the program and says, you don't have to get their consent to go in the door. Yeah, that's the way it should be in those industries. Okay.
Yeah.
And additional money was provided for increased inspections. And one of the things I've read following this case was that Colorado was saying, look, we don't have enough state inspectors. We're incredibly overworked. And that's probably true because it's really hard to get people to work anymore. And so we can't handle the workload that we have. So things fall through the cracks. I get it. But you're dealing with humans here. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. When the State Office of Funeral Home and Crematory Registration spoke to John Halford the day after the foul odor complaint came in and the police showed up, John acknowledged that he was having a problem at the Penrose site, but he claimed that he only practiced taxidermy there. Like, they didn't go in the door, dude.
Well, technically, but no.
No, not at all.
It's sort of taxidermy, but it's not.
And so apparently he tried to conceal the improper storage of corpses. And on October 2nd, there was a notice to Halford for a cease and desist for operating the Penrose site. But apparently, I don't know if they knew at this point that they were in Colorado Springs. It's a little fuzzy to me. Like, did these people ever notify the regulatory agency that, hey, by the way, we've opened a new crematory service up here in
Probably
Colorado Springs?
no, probably not, because that would probably get them in more trouble. Like, oh, you were going to start another operation in
Well,
another town and do the same exact thing?
no. This is before anybody knew the Penrose site was what was going on with the Penrose site. So I don't know if if they ever notified that they'd moved to Colorado Springs, I don't know if they did that.
I
I just
doubt
don't
it.
know. There's some gray area here when I was reading through a lot of this information. And so this return to nature, I don't know if they also uh buried people, you know, because I know that they did the cremation services for people who didn't want to be embalmed, but I don't know if they also buried people not embalmed. I don't know what happened, but here's where what really ticked me off. They did plead guilty to piling up 190 bodies inside a room temperature building while
Ugh.
they gave the grieving families cement instead of ashes.
Oh.
So they told they told people that their mom, here's your mom's ashes, and it was cement. Huh.
Oh.
And then they let her rot. They didn't even cremate her. It's not like we've lost or screwed up and we can't figure out whose ashes are whose. They flat out lied and gave the family cement.
What
How
are they gonna do with a body?
I don't know.
Ju
Good
just cook
question.
just cremate. Why are you giving people cement? Just cremate the body. It'd be easier, less hassle than having to go
I
to
know
Home
it,
Depot.
right? And here's what really got me. They used the customers' money and nearly $900,000 in COVID pandemic relief funds to buy laser body sculpting, fancy cars, trips to Vegas and Florida. They bought $31,000 in cryptocurrency and other luxury
Oh.
items. So a lot of these people were dying
Oh, that
during
pisses me
the
off.
pandemic, and they were handing relatives cement while pocketing all this money.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that pisses me off.
$900,000. Okay.
They
And
wasted it on crypto amongst, like, expensive trips and laser
yeah, yeah.
sculpting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Like they were never going to get caught. You know, criminals usually aren't smart. They usually aren't. And this is a really good example of really dumb
Well,
people.
well, yeah. "Oh, we didn't commit any crimes." "Okay, can you explain the Vegas trips and then the trips to Florida, and what is laser sculpting, by the way? What is that?" But the
Are you
worst
asking
the
me?
Yeah, what is laser sculpting?
Well, I think it's like you can go in and you get all these body sculpting done where they like cool sculpting, they can tighten up, flab, and they can do all this kind of stuff. It's kind of like
Oh, okay,
not
so
a surgical option to having your body kind of like your stomach a little flatter or
oh,
whatever.
so it's like yeah, it's like a tummy tuck or something like
And
that.
there's all kinds of stuff. You can get it on your jaw, like I had that lower facelift done, but you can go in for cool sculpting, but it doesn't last forever from what I understand. That's why I went ahead and had
Okay.
him take the waddle off. Okay.
Well, the worst crime was the cryptocurrency, but I digress.
I don't know. I mean, all of it is so bad. So they were set to to have a trial jury on their fraud charges, but as that date got closer and closer, apparently they got a little nervous and they asked to change their plea because they originally pleaded not guilty.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah,
Yep. "Oh, we're not guilty. Good. We're gonna dig up your past. You know what? I changed my
exactly,
mind."
exactly. So they did plead guilty at a hearing where all of the victims' families were listening in like an audio conference. And the plea agreement stipulated that the prosecutors would not request over 15 years imprisonment. But that at the time, so this was written, it had to be approved by the judge. And the two could have been charged with more than 200 charges of abuse of a corpse, theft, forgery, and money laundering. But the two have been charged. Sorry. So this was just the fraud charges. But then in the state court, they got him, they 200 charges of, yeah, abuse of a corpse, theft, forgery, and money laundering. The judge overseeing the civil case ordered that they pay $950 million to the families, but come on, you're never gonna
Wow.
see it. The families are never gonna see it because they took the money and they spent it. They didn't even pay rent in the Colorado Springs place. So, it's kind of what I read, it was like a symbolic, you know, it's never gonna happen, in other words. It's just never gonna happen. These people don't have deep pockets. They spent everything. And
But
this
still,
case
oof, man,
well,
$950
here's the
million.
deal. Here's the deal, a lot of times in these suits, um, they can attach future wages. So when they do get out of prison and if they can find work, the families, like a certain percentage of future wages can be attached forever. Like they're
Mhm.
so you might be making six figures, but you're only gonna bring home 36,000. They're gonna give you bare bones to live on, and all the rest of your money is gonna be going they'll attach your wages.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I don't know if Colorado can do that. I do know that other states can do it, and like I said, this case was the catalyst for Colorado to change all of their licensing requirements, but that doesn't matter if they're not inspecting.
Yep. If there's
So,
Yeah, if there's nobody to keep tabs on what's going on the inside and the outside, then what's to
yeah.
stop them from going, "Do it again."
Yeah. So, I don't know. We talked about a natural reductionist, and I don't know if that means like a natural cremation without I mean, I
It
don't
sounds
think
like
I don't think you typically get now I have to think back and all of my inspections, I don't think bodies are typically embalmed before they're cremated. So I don't
I think they
know.
are. I think they have to be well, here in Idaho, they have to be embalmed and then cremated. But
I don't know that that's
natural
true. I'd have to
reductionist
look.
natural
Um,
reductionist to me sounds like somebody that just picks out a spot, digs a hole, wraps them in sheets, and then puts them in the hole and buries them. Natural reductionist because you're being reduced to nothing.
says embalm it's a personal choice for the family to make. Most of the time, I'm looking this up. Most of the time, it's typically necessary when there would be a period of time between when death occurs and the cremation process taking place. And it can also be needed if there's going to be a viewing like at a of the body at a wake before in the cremation. So that's it's you don't have to be embalmed before being cremated.
Yeah, I thought it was law in Idaho to do that. Huh.
Yeah. I think it's yeah. I think yeah. So I don't know. This was a really short case, but it was a really disturbing case. What I found probably the most disturbing is that they gave cement out to the
Yeah,
families. I mean, I think most of these funeral directors that are in trouble like this, in this massive trouble, it's based on greed. I think it's all greed. That's kind of what we found going on here was
yeah.
that there was money
It's
being taken and not being reported and taxes weren't being, paid and they
fraud,
just
fraud, computer fraud, this fraud, that fraud.
yeah. So they did plead guilty. There's going to be prison time involved, but and I don't know what's happening right now because there's all these other charges. I don't know where that is in the process. So Colorado's a little harder for me to find some of the documents than it was in Idaho for the Downard case. But the next case we have coming up, that's a biggie. So
Oh,
um,
goody.
yeah, and like I said, the more I started with the one local because it's local and it affected friends of ours. But then the more I started researching this stuff, the more I found.
Yeah,
And yeah, I had
it,
no idea that there was these levels of problems in all over the country.
yeah.
So Hmm.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I did a little bit of digging too, and the more you dug, the more you found out that it's a ongoing problem in the United States. Who's I don't know about other countries, but United States, it was pretty bad for a while.
it's still bad. It's still bad. And I don't know, it's just like a matter of time before the next big story hits the paper on this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I don't I don't know. It's crazy to me that you
Oh,
would be entrusted with the care of a body and do this.
oh yeah. I was talking with one of our Discord friends in Discord about this, and she is in the criminal justice field, and she was amazed about this. She's like, I've never heard of this. I'm like, you really need to look into this because, I mean, if you're in criminal justice and you've seen some of these cases, it'd be just one. If you were a prosecutor, you'd be like, oh my God. Just
Yeah, well, get ready, Birdie, because when we do the next case, it's gonna take us an hour. Easy.
fun.
It's
All right.
it's gonna be it's bonkers. And I have an idea. I nobody has said this, but I have the idea that the building where everything went down is probably haunted. I mean, we deal with paranormal stuff, right? Because of
Yeah.
the stuff that went on afterwards
Oh, I
that I
wouldn't
found
doubt it. I,
that I
yeah,
found. I mean, think about the amount of anger that
you're like, "Hey, I'm going home," and you're not. You're
no,
yeah, you have to
no.
sit by your body and sit go, come on,
I
come
don't think we
on."
sit by our body, but I think you bloody well know what's going on with it, and I
Yeah.
can imagine there is a lot of festivity happening there.
What did you say?
So,
Did you say festivity?
yeah,
Like
I said
pissed
that in
off
the last case.
activity?
My dad used to say
Paranormal
that,
activity?
festivity. When you're pissed off, when you yeah, my dad would be pissed. He'd say that you're in a state of festivity today because he didn't curse, so that was his way of getting around that.
My friend says paranormal activity. So,
Whacktivity? I like that. Yeah. Yeah. So that is Return to Nature and Hallfords. And I don't know what the state like what happened with the building. I'm hoping that they destroyed the building
oh,
because what would you
yeah.
do? You could never get the level of toxic
Nope,
soup out of the building. So
nope,
you would have
nope,
to destroy the building.
nope. Knocked down, burned, stirred up, burned
Exactly.
again,
And
dug
then
up, burned again.
and I don't know if they did. I didn't see like any at the Colorado Springs building, I didn't see that they did the same stuff. Colorado Springs is a big city.
Yeah,
There would be a lot more eyes on them there.
yeah. I mean, if you knew the address and it's probably still there, then probably they rented it and then they didn't pay rent and
They just didn't pay rent.
they just didn't pay rent.
Or
They didn't do any business in it, but they just didn't pay rent. So they're like, all right, get out. And it's still a clean building. But the other one, however, yeah,
yeah,
there's no saving it. You got to knock it down,
it
declare it
has
a
to be.
toxic site, like
Yeah, from a
strip it
hazmat
down to the
perspective,
soil or whatever you
mhm,
do, and then pave
yeah.
over it.
Yeah, from the hazmat side of things, I don't think you could I mean, you can always clean up hazmat, but the level of effort it would take, you know,
Yeah, and they just knock it down and pave it, probably.
I'm sure the state acquired or the county or somebody acquired the building because they weren't paying taxes on it. So they acquired the site and just destroyed it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, if you've moved to Penrose, you might want to do some research on the land you bought if you build
Yeah.
a house because who knows? Who knows?
Oh, could you imagine that? You're like, oh, we bought this cute little house on this piece of property for dirt cheap, and they'd probably be like, you know why? Do you? Do you want to know why?
Well, isn't that like
Just, and as
Poltergeist,
soon
the
as they
movie?
told me
Because
the story, I'd be like, no, we're selling it. No, no. I mean, we're here. We're gonna find a different place, but no.
The Poltergeist, the movie was based on, or the whole premise was the house was built on a cemetery, so that
Yeah.
they left a bunch of bodies behind. So can you imagine this place? Oh my gosh, feel so bad for these families, and there's no justice in something like this.
Mm-mm.
I mean, there's a verdict, but there's no justice.
And there's
So
no bigger finger in your face than thinking you're getting grandma and you get a
a bag of
chunk of
cement.
cement.
If anybody has ever seen human remains, it's not powder like cement. It's not. There's bone fragments and so if you get something that looks like a powder, that's I'd be suspicious. I mean, I've seen hundreds of remains doing my inspections, and I had my own family's remains, and they're not powder. So yeah, I'd be a little suspicious. Just saying. Yeah.
I mean, how do you test? You pour water in it and then wait for it to harden. And if it doesn't, then
God, Bertie.
I couldn't help it. I'm sorry.
So wrong. It's so wrong. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, that's enough. Enough jokes. It's a serious topic. I
I
feel
know it's
bad.
still, yeah, I'd still, oh, that'd make me so mad.
Yeah.
Oh. And to find out you didn't get grandma back, she's still in the building.
Well, you'll never get her back. That's the
Yeah,
thing. With 190 bodies stacked up,
yeah.
you're not you're
And
not
she's in between like 4 or 5 bodies just rotting away on a table somewhere.
well, and that's what I'm assuming that when they would have taken those remains out, that they were cremated at that point because you have to get rid of what's there. And I would assume, I don't know for sure, that I mean, how the FBI came in and how they would have tested, and oh jeez, I feel bad for all of the law enforcement and the FBI and everybody involved with something like that.
Yeah,
I
it's just,
feel really bad for them to have to walk into a scene like that because that's gonna live with them forever.
yeah. I couldn't imagine be like, just be like, "Hey, what do we got today?" And be like, "Funeral home." Be like, "Cool." And they'd be like, "No, go
You have
downstairs."
no idea.
You'd be like, you get within like 5 feet, and you'd be like, "Oh," and they're like, "Yeah, you got to go suit up. You got to go downstairs and look at this." And yeah, that probably scar me for
You
a
know,
while.
I mean, if I had a do-over in life, I would have probably gone into, medical examiner because it really interests me. It really does. But I don't know, something like this would have I don't know. I don't know. That would have been hard.
Yeah,
That
I
would
don't
be
know.
hard.
I'd like to talk to somebody that's actually been there and worked on the case and be like, "All right, we want to hear all of it, like all of it, because we're curious and we got that morbid fascination with this type of stuff, but not that morbid. Just be like, how bad was it, type of thing. Like,
Oh, yeah, they probably wouldn't talk about it because it would just trigger so much. Yeah, it would
maybe
be
who
hard for
knows?
I imagine that would be hard. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Anyway,
anyway, that's the show for tonight. Thank you for hanging in there with us on this incredibly gross topic. We have quite a few more stories to go, and we'll be bringing them to you as I get them finished up. Thanks for hanging out with us for the Nightmare Roadshow. Talk to you later.
see you. Bye.